I was sitting under a palm-attached roof in the province here in the Philippines. It was Lent, and I hadn't eaten meat in days. And yet, a family invited me to a feast, a real one, with music, laughter, coconut wine, and no meat in sight. As you could imagine, I was pretty confused. I had no idea what was going on. Was this breaking the fast or honoring it? What I discovered through that moment, though, and so many other moments like this from across the world, I discovered that the Catholic relationship with food is not about guilt or gluttony. It's about rhythm, it's about resurrection, and it's about God. Whether you're in the slums of Manila or the cathedrals of Rome, the way Catholics fast and the way they feast says something profound about who we are. So stick with me, because these stories are going to involve some ancient traditions, some spicy street food, and the kind of spiritual insight that only comes when you have an empty stomach. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about fasting and how it is a beautiful Catholic tradition. Despite what some Protestants say, some Protestants are adamantly against fasting. They do not like it. They think that Catholics are wrong for doing it. I've had many Protestants in the USA argue with me about the merits of fasting. Today, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about why fasting is beautiful. We're going to talk about why fasting brings us closer to God in a very Catholic way. We're going to talk about why it is okay to fast as a Catholic. Despite what the world may tell you, despite what your hunger may tell you, whatever is trying to tell you otherwise, it's not true. It is okay to fast. And in fact, fasting can bring you closer to God. There's so much, not just evidence from a spiritual side, but evidence even from a biological side. And if you fast and you don't eat, you become more alert, become more human. You tap into that human power of the mind. So it's not just about becoming closer to God. When you fast, you become more in tune with yourself and your own surroundings. So today, let's talk about that, and let's get into these beautiful traditions. Before we go on, guys, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you like the video. You liking and subscribing is the best way to support the videos that I do, and it helps me to continue making videos like this for you guys. I try to make them every Monday through Friday. It helps when you guys like and subscribe. Let's push for 1,000 followers. Part 1, a Lenten feast in the Philippines. You know, during Holy Week, I was able to stay near a fishing village here in the Philippines. I live pretty close to a fishing village. I live right beside the ocean. And the people there, they were preparing for some annual, I'm not sure what it's called in Bisaya or Tagalog, but it's an annual thing where they do an all-night chanting of the Passion of Christ. It's almost like the Stations of the Cross, but I think it's a little different. I'm not sure. There was no meat, there was no parties, but oddly enough, there was a celebration. I'm used to having parties here in the Philippines. I'm used to having meat at these parties. I've had some delicious, some amazing food when we all come together and we party. I expected that. It was my first time doing Lent here. This is my first full year being in the Philippines. So I expected some type of meat or something, but that didn't happen. And there was no parties. I expected that because you guys have seen the videos I've posted of me partying with my fiance's family, but there was no parties. It was just pure beauty in admiring what Christ went through for us. Locals, though, they did come together. They had rice cakes and grilled eggplant and salted fish. And they even had, I'm not sure what it's called, but it's like a banana that's cooked in coconut milk, I think. I think that's what it is. It's really good. It tastes really good. It's really sweet. The sweetness is amazing, especially with the salted fish. But we had stuff like that. And that food is good. Now, I know there's people who would argue that whether or not fish is meat. I typically tend to say fish is meat, but for some reason, the Catholic Church doesn't count it as meat, especially while you're fasting. So I don't argue with them. I'll just let it be. But we still got to eat and spend time in communion with one another. And even though I was different, you know, I was just this tall white guy in the midst of shorter, darker people, it didn't feel like that. It did not feel, I did not feel like an outsider. I felt like I was at home. I felt like I was part of the group, and I loved that. You know, there was no gluttony. Nobody was trying to hoard all the food and eat all the food. There was no amazing indulgences in pork or chicken or beef. It was all fish and rice cakes, simple things, nice, simple little foods. But despite not having all those great meats and despite not being a glutton for food, there was still a sense of joy. There was a sense of peace. When you can hear the ocean and you can feel the wind blowing at nighttime, there's something beautiful about that. But then you remember what you're doing at the Stations of the Cross, and in some way you can connect to what Jesus went through that night. That's a hard thing to explain, but you can connect to what he went through. I remember asking someone that was related to my fiance. I asked her, what is this celebration? What are you guys doing? What is this about? And she said it's because Christ is with us even when we're hungry. Christ is with us especially when we're hungry. And that's when it kind of clicked. This wasn't a contradiction. It was a perfect expression of faith. Here these people are, a lot of them go hungry anyhow, not just during this time. They go hungry throughout the year. A lot of them don't have money. And they're having this celebration. They're having this remembrance of what Christ went through. And it's to remember that Christ is always with them, no matter what. And I love that. People in the Philippines, they have a hard time. They have a hard life. It's not easy for them. They don't have a lot of food. They don't have a lot of money, especially in the areas that I live, in the province areas. There are people in the city that might have money. They might have a lot of things. They might have condos. They might have homes. But people in the province, they're not so lucky. A lot of their homes are built with bamboo and palm trees. They don't have refrigerators. What I have in here, they don't have. They don't have that kind of stuff. From my fiance's family, I don't know anybody that even has an aircon. We're the only ones. They like coming over here to cool off because it's so cold in here compared to out there. So this time they had together was just beautiful, and it reminded them that Christ is there, and he's there with you too. He's not just there with them. He's there with you. He's there with me, and he will always be with us, even when we're hungry, even when we're not. Let's move on over to Croatia. I've not been there, but I have seen some of the stuff that happens in Croatia. The country has a beautiful Catholic history. It has some of the most beautiful monasteries you'll ever see, and very, very devout people. There are some monks there that do a 3-day silent retreat. During that retreat, they don't talk, they don't make noise, they're in silent prayer the whole time. They don't eat meat, they don't eat sugar, they don't even drink coffee. That would be hard for me. Most of the other stuff I could probably do pretty easily, but not having coffee might drive me a little crazy, especially since I think one of my favorite coffees, I think it's in the USA, it's called Mystic Monk coffee. It's amazing. The best coffee I've ever had. Well, maybe it's just because I'm Catholic. I don't know. They're making coffee beans. I could imagine how hard it is to not have coffee. All they have is their prayer, their bread, olives, and their water. And that's it. That's all they eat, and that's all they drink for 3 days. And they just pray in silence. They don't say a word to anyone other than God. At first, people might be irritated by this. They might get headaches. And of course, they're going to get hungry and have withdrawals from coffee like I would. The next morning, they're eating an egg on some bread, and that's it. I guess you could think that maybe that's like a banquet compared to the olives and the bread. Something that the monks try to teach you in doing that is that hunger isn't the enemy, it's the path. Hunger can bring you to God. It gets you into that space where you realize how helpless you are, how much you need to survive. And Jesus told his apostles that God feeds the birds. He clothes the flowers in the field. Are they not more important? And that's a reminder to us that Jesus telling us we're more important than birds and flowers. He will take care of us. We have to have faith in him. The monks remember that when they go on those silent retreats and they just pray and they barely eat, and what they do eat is not good. They remember that God always provides. And that's the important thing in fasting for them. It's a path to God. It's a path to understand God more fully than what we understand him. So let's go to the next place. Let's take a flight to Rome and let's talk about Easter. All my Catholic friends know about St. Peter's Basilica. It's a beautiful, beautiful basilica. Probably the most beautiful Catholic church in the world. Probably. I guess that's relative. But for Easter, they have a vigil mass. After 40 days of restraining from certain things, repenting from sins that they've committed, and longing for Christ and the food, the lights come on. You hear the bells outside. You hear them ringing the bells. And then a feast begins. Wine is flowing. Pastries were passed around. Children are dancing and families are embraced. You see this and you can't truly rejoice in the feast unless you've walked through the desert of the fast. The deeper the emptiness, the louder the hallelujah. They go through all this time fasting and restraining from certain things for Lent to show their devotion to God. And when they can finally let loose, they can finally eat, and they can finally do the things that they would normally do, they experience such great joy. And it reminds us of what some of the saints call the dark night of the soul. The dark night of the soul is when a saint is going through the worst time of their life. They feel broken. They feel like God maybe's abandoned them, kind of like what Jesus did on the cross when he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? It's kind of what the dark night of the soul is. This puts it into perspective a little bit because we are not able to do the things, we're not able to experience the joy from the things that we want to do. But those dark nights, they end. They come to an end. They do not last forever. And God will be there waiting for us when it is over. And when it is over, there's the greatest sense of joy. There's a great sense of wanting to just say, hallelujah. I love you, Lord. Thank you for helping me through this. Thank you for being there for me as I was going through this tough time. This extreme fast that leads up to a feast just reminds us that no matter how dark life can get, no matter how hard life can be, there is always light at the end. And when we get to the end, the joy that we will feel will be unimaginable. So now let's fly on over to Mexico and let's look at the Day of the Dead. I have not been to one of these, but I really want to go. I want to see what a feast like is for one of the dead. During this time, families build altars and cook traditional dishes, and they gather to feed the spirits of their loved ones. And they have sugar skulls and all these really interesting products, things that they can use for their altar. But this isn't about indulgences. It's about remembrance, what is sacred and communal. Even in Mexico, food was more than nourishment. It was a communion. And I realized that Catholic feasting isn't about pleasure, it's about presence. It's about being in the moment with the people you love. It's about being in the moment with the community and the people you loved who are in heaven, who have passed on. Being in the moment with them because they're saints in heaven. And if they are in heaven, they are closest to God. They're the people that you can ask prayers for in heaven because they're there. They're the most righteous. They're much more righteous than we are. They're there. They're present with us. They're praying for us. They want us to get to heaven too. And this holiday reminds us of that. Reminds us of the ones we've lost who are in heaven waiting for us. Reminds us to be present with one another. That food is amazing, but it is a reminder. It's a reminder of who we are. We're Catholic and we're connected. We're all connected. Living in the dead. We're all part of one church. There's only one body. There's not two bodies. There's not a body on earth and a body in heaven. There's one body, one church, one faith, one baptism for the forgiveness of sins. That's it. So those in heaven, they're part of that one church. And they are much more righteous than us because they are already in heaven. They are experiencing the joy of God. So that communal presence is for everyone in the church. I kind of wish this was something that was more common. Because I've told you guys before that with indulgences, one of the things I like to do is I like to go to cemeteries and I like to pray for the dead. So I wish that was something that was more common. And then finally, let's fly over to Ethiopia, where they have the deepest fasts you can imagine. Again, this is not a place I've been yet, but I've read up on it. I read up on it mostly for this video, but also it's good to know as a Catholic. One of the most intense experiences you could ever feel is in Ethiopia, but it's Orthodox Christians. And these Christians have over 180 days of fasting a year, where there's no meat, no dairy, or animal products, period. There are priests there, they're very skinny. They're fasting for days and days, but they still have this radiant and peaceful and joyful look to them. Even though they're skinny and they're going through a lot, it's like fasting empties the body to fuel the soul. It's not about the suffering, it's about the focus. And that brings me back to what I was telling you guys before. When you fast and you don't eat, there's evidence that shows that it causes you to be more alert. It causes you to kick into that part of your brain that goes into survival mode. You take that energy and you're focusing it on God. You're focusing it on what matters in your life. And that's what these priests are doing. Going that long without food, especially the ones who don't eat much at all, they're focused on one thing. They're focused on God. They're doing it to dedicate themselves to God, to show that they love God and they trust in His providence. The Orthodox Christians, they're not Catholic, but they're still very traditional. The Orthodox Christians split off from the Catholic. I don't remember what year it was. We call it the Great Schism. It was probably the worst schism that ever happened in the Catholic Church. And I wish that we could bring them back into the fold. They're the closest sect of Christianity to Catholicism. They have beautiful traditions, their churches, their cathedrals. It's so amazing. You would be awestruck if you ever got to go to one. I went to one when I was in Washington, D.C., and I loved it. I want to go back. I don't remember what language they spoke. It was an Eastern Orthodox though. Now, let's take a step back and let's look at what this has taught us. Let's look at what we can learn from this. You know, from the deserts of Egypt to the small places in the Philippines, fasting is a kind of sacrificial clarity. You sacrifice things to give your mind clarity so that you can focus on God. You can focus on your Creator. It trains your soul and it resets your mind. It builds up your body by tearing down your body. You become a better person if you're able to fast. You become a more spiritual person. As long as you're doing the fasting for the right reason, you become more spiritual, you become stronger, you become more focused, you become more emotionally in tuned with the world around you, more spiritually attuned to Christ. It reminds us that we are not ruled by our cravings. We are made for more. Our cravings should not be our boss, should not be the one guiding us to whatever path it wants to guide us. God is the one who guides us. And that's what we should be focused on. We should focus on God. That is why we fast. We fast in order to become closer to God. So when we're fasting, that's what we need to focus on. We don't need to focus on everything else going on. We don't need to go brag about it. We just need to focus on God. And that's it. You know, Jesus fasted, the apostles fasted, early Christians fasted, and Catholics are invited to do the same, not for punishment, but for purification. And that's something that many of you Catholics, many of us, we need to understand. We're doing it for purification. We're not doing it for punishment. We're doing it to become closer to God. So when Protestants say that it's wrong, that all food was made for us, or whatever it is that they say, agree with them. Yeah, all of it is, but we still fast. That doesn't mean don't fast. That just means when we can eat anything when we're not fasting. We're fasting because we want to become closer to God. That hunger gives us reminders. All of these things that we talked about, that hunger reminds us of that. When I was a Protestant, I didn't understand it. When I was becoming Catholic, I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why there was fasting until I did my own research, until I talked to my priest, until I talked to the nun of my church. I did not understand any of it. You know, when you fast, your prayers become clearer, your senses are heightened, your empathy increases, and your ego shrinks. Your prayers become clearer because you're able to just talk to God. You know what you need, you praise Him, you give Him adoration, and you ask Him for what you actually need. Your senses are heightened because being in that hunger state brings out this evolutionary thing within us where when we were animals, you know, we went to survival mode. When we were hungry, we went to that survival mode, clicked in our brain. And that made us more focused because we had to be able to focus to survive. We had to be able to focus to find food. So it heightens our senses. The empathy increases because if you're fasting with other people, come together, you're loving one another, taking care of one another, praying together. I hope if you're fasting together, you can pray together. You're going to church together. You're worshiping God together. The empathy that you have for other people increases because of that. And then your ego shrinks because you realize how helpless you are without God. Your ego will go down drastically once you start realizing that you can't do everything on your own. I have a really hard time understanding that. But once you do start to understand it, your ego starts to get less and less and less. You start to depend more on God. You realize that things are going to be okay, that you don't have to have everything under control. You just have to trust in your Creator. Have you ever noticed how food tastes better after a fast? It's kind of how grace works too. You feel it more when you've made space for it. You feel the grace that God wants to give you much more when you're ready to receive it, when you're ready to take it on. And that's kind of how fasting reminds us of that. Fasting is a foretaste of heaven. Catholics, we don't have random feasts. They follow a liturgical calendar that mirrors Christ's life. It mirrors his birth, his death, his resurrection, the Pentecost, and the end, at the end of the church here, about the book of Revelation. Feasting teaches celebration as worship. It's talks about whether it's roasted lamb at Easter, tamales for Our Lady of Guadalupe, or some delicious food at a beautiful Filipino baptism. These foods carry meaning. They're all done during particular times of the year to signify what that meaning is. This is one thing you guys have to realize about being Catholic. Everything we do has some kind of meaning, and once you start to understand that meaning, it starts to open up your mind, and you start to receive the grace that Christ wants to give you. When you walk into a church and you see the altar where the Eucharist is, what you should be seeing is Jesus. When a priest holds up the host, see Jesus holding up the host. When he said, "This is my body," you shouldn't just see these plain things. In your mind, you should see what is actually happening. The spiritual battle, the spiritual realm that is going on during that very moment. That's what you should be seeing. These foods, they remind us that God is in the joy, not just the suffering. And they prepare us for the ultimate feast. And that ultimate feast, this is especially for my non-Catholic friends who act like we don't read the book of Revelation. That ultimate feast is the wedding banquet of the Lamb in the book of Revelation, chapter 19. That is the ultimate feast. And the feast and the fasting that us Catholics do, that is what we are waiting on. We are preparing for that beautiful feast in heaven. And it's talked about in Revelation 19. Read the book of Revelation. The Catholic Church, we read from it every November at the end of the church year. But if you have time, read from it. So you guys, travel has taught me that Catholicism isn't just a universal doctrine. It is universal in flavor. You know, there's Fish Fridays in Italy. There's Holy Week soups in Guatemala. There's Advent pastries in France. There's Candlemas pancakes in the UK. All of them are different, but they're all pointing to the same truth. And that is, faith is not just what you believe. It's how you live, how you eat, and how you share. It's not just faith. It's the way you live, what you do for others, and what you do for God. It's how you eat, the fasting and the feasting that reminds us of that great day, one day when we're in heaven and we're at that banquet with Christ. And it's about how you share, because in that heavenly realm, at the banquet with Christ, we're not going to be alone. We're going to be with others. Here, when we fast or when we feast, we do it together. That's what it's about. It's about coming together. So guys, here's a challenge. Try to fast intentionally. The next time you travel, or it doesn't even have to be the next time you travel, it can be today, it can be this week. Dedicate one day to fasting. Skip a meal. Pray instead. Instead of taking your time to cook or buy the meal and eat it, pray. Write down what you notice. The silence, the longing, the presence, the hunger, everything you've noticed. Write it down. Put it in your app. You're using a phone or a computer. You can just type it up in your notepad on the phone. That's what I do. If I want to journal or anything, I just use my phone. I don't even waste money on paper and pencil anymore. Do that. And when you have a feast with meaning. Attend a Catholic feast. Go to one abroad. Try to go to a Catholic feast in a different country, like what I've done. Even if you're not fluent in the language, eat the food. Dance if they're dancing. Mourn if they're mourning. Take a look at everything and don't take anything for granted. Know that it's all done for a reason. It's all done for a purpose. Embrace it. It's okay. It's okay to embrace the Catholic faith, the Catholic tradition. It's okay to try and understand why we do what we do. And finally, guys, comment below. What's a meal that you've made that's made you feel closer to God? Have you ever fasted while traveling? Or what's your favorite Catholic feast food and where did you try it? Let us know some of these things. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk about being Catholic. I love being Catholic. I originally started my YouTube about that and I stopped, but that was my original intent, was to talk about being Catholic. So guys, hit that like and subscribe button though if you found this to be helpful, and maybe share it with a friend, maybe a friend that you want to fast with, or a friend you want to have a feast with, or a friend who isn't Catholic. Send them my way. Let them watch my videos. Let them respond to my videos. I love that. I love those kind of topics. That is the one thing I am most passionate about in my life, is being Catholic. Man does not live by bread alone, but wow, when it's shared in faith, even bread becomes divine. Know that you guys are valuable, that you matter. God bless and peace.